A regular contributor to Huffington Post Religion and an associate of an Episcopal monastery, John Backman writes extensively on spiritual topics, including contemplative practice and its ability to help us dialogue across divides. He authored Why Can't We Talk? Christian Wisdom on Dialogue as a Habit of the Heart. There are copies of this available for sale. John will autograph it. He'll sign anybody's name you'd like. It's a publication of Skylight Paths Publishing from 2012. His articles have appeared in numerous faith-based publications, progressive and conservative, including the print or online versions of Christian Century, Prism, Fellowship, and Relevant. John currently serves on the board of directors for the National Coalition for Dialogue and Deliberation, and he has presented internationally on dialogue-related topics at academic conferences and faith gatherings. In his other life, he has run his own business for more than 25 years, writing marketing materials for such clients as Coca-Cola, the Bank of New York, and GE. He held his bachelor's, you laughing at Kathy, bachelor's degree in sociology from Gordon College, and his wife is a librarian. Please join me in welcoming my friend John Backman.
Thank you, Candy. Thank you to the Friends of the Albany Public Library for allowing me to speak. Thank you to all of you so much for coming out. In the next 35 or 40 minutes, I will attempt to do something preposterous.
Yay!
Thank you. I'm going to try connecting a very large societal problem with a very individual approach to addressing it. Large problem, small approach to the solution. So let's talk about the problem first. You may have noticed recently that we can't talk to each other anymore. We have a very hard time doing that. Polarization is taking place at all levels of society. I'm going to give you some examples. I'm sure you could come up with these yourself. The quality of dialogue in politics and government has reached toxic levels. Think of the negative campaign advertising, the ad hominem arguments. I don't like your position, not because I disagree with the points on your position, but because you're a right-wing wacko. That gets us nowhere, of course. Things like the birther debate. But it's not just Washington that has this problem. Among the populace, partisan hostility has grown deeper and more extensive than at any time in 2 decades, according to a report from the Pew Research Center. The level of commentary on social media and on the internet in general from both pundits and everyday people ranges from rude to vicious. Spend 10 minutes on Facebook and you'll know what I mean. This is wreaking havoc. In the last few years alone, congressional gridlock, as you know, has brought us perilously close to financial disaster, government shutdown, including actually crossing the line to government shutdown in 2013. We saw this most recently with the whole issue with Homeland Security and the standoff over that. The most recent congressional session passed the fewest laws in the last 60 years. That in itself might be okay if it was just a one-off, but it represents a downward trend that has been going on for the last 5 Congresses. So obviously, there's a serious problem there. Outside of Washington, you may have noticed faith communities and denominations fighting vicious wars of words for decades, sometimes even dividing and leaving each other in rancor over marriage equality and related issues. One of the things that worries me the most is that I'm now hearing a number of sources, from the president to Foreign Policy magazine to The Economist, asserting that our polarization is beginning to damage our standing in the Candy's eloquent reading of my bio, you might think, so who's this guy? Why him particularly to talk about it? So let me give you an idea of where I'm coming from in the way that I think about these things. In the last few years, I have made it my life's work to look at some fundamental issues in today's social fabric, like why we can't talk, and get beyond the usual explanations to see if there is something deeper going on. At the same time, I spent the last 10 years studying and living as an associate of an Episcopal monastery. An associate, just to give you an idea, the monks in a monastery live according to what they call a rule of life, which is a list of principles and practices and values that guide their lives together and help them grow closer in community and also closer to God. Associates of monasteries do the same thing, but in a simplified way, tailored to their life in the workaday world. So the monks pray 5 times a day. They chant the Psalms and do that sort of thing. I can't do that because I don't have the time, but I can pray once a day. It's that kind of thing. At any rate, over the past 10 years, I've become persuaded that monasticism has a great deal to say about these foundational issues. So I use that monastic lens to look at the issues and then, as much as I can, translate the insights for use in a postmodern secular world. And that's what I'm going to try to do here. Very big problem, very small individual approach to addressing it. Or, to go back to our questions, why can't we talk, and what can we do about it? So, let's look at why we can't talk. In the book, I explore 6 barriers to effective dialogue. I'm sure you could come up with 6 more, or narrow the list. Those were the 6 that interested me. Today I want to discuss 4 of them that I think don't get as much attention as they deserve, including one that is so fundamental that I think it may underlie all the rest of them. So, obstacle number 1, black and white thinking. The Pew study that I just cited focused its findings on Republicans and Democrats. They found, for instance, that the ideological overlap between parties has diminished to almost nothing. And the overall share of Americans who express consistently conservative or consistently liberal views has doubled over the past 2 decades. Clearly, there are a lot of folks out there now who are thinking right down the line and have a lot of hostility for the folks who think on this side, black and white. But this happens in so many places outside political discourse as well. Think of the religious conservatives that you have heard who refuse to compromise or even dialogue on certain issues because, as they read it, their sacred text is both clear and certain. How many times have you heard somebody say, the Bible says? This is one of the reasons that there has been so much controversy over same-sex marriage. There are roughly 6 passages in the Bible that could or could not be construed to say that same-sex attraction is a sin. And because the religious conservatives are reading that scripture literally, they feel duty-bound to oppose same-sex marriage because of what they see in their sacred text. Of course, it's not just a religious problem. Nationalists still raise the issue of whether opponents love America. Not that we've heard that recently. The implication is, of course, either you agree with me or you don't love our country. It's the current version of that old 70s bumper sticker, America, love it or leave it. Another one, partisans on either side of the abortion debate want nothing to do with the other side's ideas. I have a couple of friends who are just lovely, lovely people. They're witty, they're charming, they're wildly intelligent. They have their opinions and they have strong opinions, but in general they're fun to be around until you get them on the subject of abortion. And then they turn into raving crazy people. They kind of, you can see them stiffen and look down their nose and pronounce what they believe. And you can tell that into embryonic stem cell research. Well, if life begins at conception, I've made that position right here, I'm certain of that. Oh no, now here comes this other thing, I better oppose that too. The problem is, the more absolutes we have and hold on to, the less there is to talk about, and the less we can do this dialogue across divides. The barrier to dialogue is, if you have the final word on a given issue, why even talk to the other side? They're wrong. No point talking to people who are wrong. So that's obstacle one, the black and white thinking. Number two, the structure of media. This is not about media bias. I would submit that even if you strip away all the corporate influence out of the media is always going to be biased because it's written and reported by human beings. There's really not much we can do about that. This is more about the way media is structured today and how it conspires against honest, authentic dialogue. First of all, media trends towards short. Think of all the stories in all the corners of the world that have to be reported somehow in 30 or 60 minutes on TV news, which is still, TV news is still very influential. It lends itself to short segments and sound bites. So you miss a lot of the nuance, you miss a lot of the in-depth reporting that you might see. A lot of people, and because a lot of people get their news from TV, that becomes a very significant barrier. This is a structural problem for TV news, but I think it's also a problem where it doesn't need to be. Many more people, in fact, get their news from the internet now than from any other source. That might be fine if online reporters used the bandwidth that is available to them, which is basically unlimited, to look at stories in depth and to do some serious investigative reporting. Instead, they're making the story shorter these days to match what is becoming the national attention span.
Exactly.
Even 24-hour news channels, which in theory have all the time there is to look at issues in depth, give us the same brief treatment of a lot of stories, just repeated over and over and over. So media trend towards short, but they also trend towards sensational. In the quest for ratings, and by the way, I don't blame the media for this, because it's a natural quest in our free enterprise system. It's a competitive landscape, it's a fragmented media landscape, so they have to go for ratings. But in the quest for ratings, everything becomes breaking news, desensitizing us to truly important events. Moreover, yesterday's catastrophe gets forgotten in favor of today's dramatic development. I'm willing to bet that at least some of you have had the experience that I did in 2002, when all of a sudden there was this gigantic shift in national attention from Afghanistan to Iraq. And I kept listening and thinking, what on earth is going on? Why? I totally get why we were in Afghanistan. I understand the historical purpose behind that war. We know the enemy. We know all this stuff. What does Iraq have to do with it? What I would submit is that the Bush administration turned its attention, and the media just followed suit, which is why Afghanistan so often got referred to as things like the Lost War. So the barrier toward dialogue here is when we get news like this, in that constant barrage that we get news, it leaves us without the vocabulary and the attention span to dialogue in depth. It takes away the sense of nuance, the sense of subtlety, and we're left with a very small box. So barrier number 3 feeds right into that, the exploitation of language. This is very simple. Partisans on either side of an issue, particularly those with access to media, craft language to set the bounds of discussion. They might do it with political gain and malice aforethought, or they might do it completely innocently. A few examples. What is an extremist? phrase being used today is, an extremist is anyone who doesn't agree with me. Automatically marginalizes people. Back in 2009, when the healthcare debate really started getting going in earnest, we heard the phrases government takeover of healthcare. And of course, who can forget the wonderful death panels? But those, in the middle of what I saw as a fairly rational debate with a lot of very good ideas on the table on both sides of the aisle, all of a sudden these phrases circumscribed what the debate was about. I'm going to pick on a local organization that I have an incredibly high regard for because they have been so effective and because I happen to believe in and sympathize with their positions. But I'll pick on them anyway. When we went through this whole casino siting process recently, in my town, there sprung up this grassroots organization called Save East Greenbush. Marvelous organization. They did tremendous work in terms of organizing at the grassroots. And they obviously did want to save East Greenbush from the deleterious effects of a casino. However, think about it. Aren't there people on the other side of that issue who also wanted to save East Greenbush? They did. They wanted to save East Greenbush from an economic downturn. But the name, and I would not imply that Save East Greenbush chose their name to do this, but it does sort of take that away from the other side. It circumscribes the debate. The shaping of languages, and this is a barrier, sets the box for discussion. And so it eliminates nuance and it eliminates out-of-box thinking. So that's obstacle 3. Now, these barriers, and most of the ones that I describe in the book, are systemic. But one is intensely individual, instinctive, and I think fundamental to all the rest of them, and that is fear. So obstacle number 4. We have fear of a lot of things. We fear the anger that dialogue can unleash. I mean, how often have you seen conversations go from 0 to vicious in 5 seconds? We fear the risk that we might have to change our conviction. If we are actually honest and open-hearted, we may have to change the way we think about things. We might have to change it drastically. That's scary because we built our lives around some of these convictions. Most fundamentally, we react with one of our most basic instincts as a species, and that is fight or flight. So that's why we can't talk, among other reasons. In terms of my book, we've covered chapters 1 and 3. So there's a whole lot more to talk about. But the rest of the book turns on this fundamental individual issue of fear and leads us into what we can do about it. The book suggests, and this is the part that I said was preposterous, how the practices and principles of Christian monasticism can reorient us at our deepest levels to effect an inner transformation so that as near as we can get, our first instinct is not